Let me ask you something. Has there ever been a point in time when there was something that you thought you wanted real bad, so you messed around and you got it, only to be disappointed with it after the fact? Let's face it, we probably all could put ourselves in that boat, some of us more than once. That being said, welcome to today's video. Hey there folks, how you doing today? Welcome back to the channel. Please bear with the background racket that you're liable to hear throughout this production. There is life happening right outside the studio. Let's not let it stand in the way of the fun that we have in store for us. Out here on the table in front of me is a rifle that many of you may have seen either as a backdrop or in a cameo appearance on something else here on the channel in the past few months. But we haven't really talked about this one in depth. Now, for those of you that know me and you know how I operate when it comes to getting a new toy, you'll know that typically I get it, I take it out and play with it, and then I come back and I tell you guys all about what I discovered. That was what I intended to do with this one. But here it is several months later, and I'm just now getting around to telling you about it. There's also a reason for that. Let's start back at the beginning. For those of you that are not immediately familiar with what it is that you're seeing on the table out here in front of me, this is a Ruger M77 Hawkeye Guide Gun. This one is chambered in .30-06. Now, Ruger came out with the Hawkeye Guide Gun several years ago, and as soon as they came out with it, I thought I needed to have one. The problem was, they're a little bit pricey, and I just couldn't ever really justify it. Now, if you're not familiar with what a Ruger Hawkeye Guide Gun is, let me read some of the specs to you so that you can be better equipped to know what it is that we're dealing with here. This is a rifle that was made for like professional hunters, hunting guides, folks that take a rifle out and beat on it on a regular basis. This one features a 20-inch cold hammer forged barrel with a 1-in-10 6-groove right-handed twist on a matte finished stainless steel barreled action, complete with a factory muzzle brake or a factory muzzle weight, which Ruger claims you can switch between the muzzle brake and the muzzle weight without any discernible shift in impact with a given load. It also features a thread protector if you don't want to run either the muzzle brake or the muzzle weight. If you want to run a different type of muzzle device on your weapon, it is threaded with a 1/2 by 24-inch thread. The barrel is topped off with a set of express sights, which Ruger claims are factory set for 50 yards. Moving on back to the action, it features a non-rotating Mauser-type controlled round feed fixed blade style extractor for positive control of the round moving forward and backward, which a lot of people consider to be a standard feature on a dangerous game rifle. Some folks are okay with just doing it with a push feed, but professional hunters tend to go for a controlled round feed, which this model possesses. It also features Ruger's LC6 trigger system, which they claim is smooth and crisp right out of the box, which it does feel pretty good, and I'll go ahead and cut in a clip of the trigger pull weight test with a Wheeler trigger gauge. It also features the popular 3-position safety system. A hinged floor plate, internal scope mounts, and a barrel band front sling swivel, which we'll get into why that is an important feature on a rifle like this in a little bit. It also came with a matched set of factory 1-inch stainless steel scope rings. All of that is nestled inside this Green Mountain laminate stock. All that for the low, low price of $1,659 MSRP. Before you freak out, I did not pay full MSRP for this rifle, but I did spend a lot of money on it, and I spent more than I should have, perhaps. Now, I have the rifle topped off with the Leupold VX3 HD 3.5 by 10 by 42 with a CDS duplex reticle, which, for what the rifle is, this scope is a very good choice. Although in the grand scheme of things, the scope with an MSRP of around $500 is relatively inexpensive when you consider what we have into the rifle. So knowing that we have a package sitting here that is well north of $2,000 MSRP, you got to be saying to yourself, this is going to be an end-all be-all for a hunting rifle, right, Jason? Well, I wish I could say that that was the case. If you recall back to, I don't know, March or April of this year when I was making videos on other subjects, you probably saw this rifle hanging back here on the wall behind me. Then a little later, you noticed the rifle was gone. There is a reason for that.
Well, we're waiting.
When I first picked up the rifle from my dealer, I noticed that it had a real sticky, oily, kind of like a silicone-based oil spray all over the metal parts, and it had leaked over onto the wood. I think that is a treatment that the dealer had put on the rifle. Well, I got it home, I cleaned it up, and I got ready to take it out to the range. But after just a couple of weeks of it hanging back here on the wall, I noticed that it was starting to flash rust all over the stainless steel metal on this rifle. At first, I was getting about ready to freak out because I've never had that happen to a stainless steel rifle before. But out of frustration, I dug out the manual that came with the rifle, and I'll show you here that the manual actually features a segment on dealing with rust on your new stainless steel rifle that you paid nearly $2,000 for. Now, I have had several stainless steel firearms in the past. A couple of them I still own, to include Rugers, that I never had these kind of issues with. So all I can figure is Ruger included that information into the manual because it is a problem with these rifles. So I took the rifle out to the range with an assortment of 30-06 ammo. If you look at all of these boxes of ammunition out here on the table, I took them all with me and tested it out. My old standby for a 30-06 for deer hunting that I do here in South Texas is 150 grain Remington core locked. So that's what I sighted the rifle in with. Then I switched to some of these other loads so I could see what they would do. Okay, I've got this written down, so bear with me. The results I got from the Remington 180 grain core locks was, up here you'll see, I had about a 3-inch group, and if you look down at the bottom, you'll notice those two were almost touching, and then you had that one that was the second round fired that jumped way high. And at first I thought it was just me, but I tried that again a little while later with that same round, and the results just weren't good. I think it was just happenstance that those two rounds were nearly touching. So then I moved over here to the Hornady 178 grain Precision Hunter ELDX, which netted a group at just north of 2 inches. It was 2.1 inches there. Moving on down to the middle, I had a group of Winchester PowerPoint 180 grain, which came in just about 2 inches. Then we moved down to the Hornady American Whitetail 150 grain, which was 1.9 inches. Winchester PowerPoint 150 grain, which was again about a 2-inch group. And the best of the day was the Federal PowerShock 150s, which came in at 1.4 inches. Now, something I'll point out here with the Hornady American Whitetail and the Winchester PowerPoint was I was shooting at 2 different points on the target, but they hit at about the same spot. So the issues I had with the initial sight-in with this particular rifle was that not only were none of the groups what I would call good groups, especially at 100 yards with a brand new rifle with a quality piece of glass on it, but there was also significant point of impact shifts between each and every round. Now, some of you might be saying, well, maybe you were just having a bad range day, or maybe you can't shoot in the first place. But on that same day, I took my Ruger American out to the range, and I had several sub-minute of angle groups with a variety of different ammunitions out of that rifle. So while under normal circumstances, I would say perhaps it was just me, when dealing with the fact that I was literally switching between 3 rifles and the other 2 rifles were shooting very good, I'm going to say that it was probably something to do with this particular setup. Now, the rings have been torqued to spec. All of the screws have been double checked and triple checked. Everything seemed okay there. I also checked the tension on the bolts holding the barreled action into the stock, and there was no issue with that either. So I think we can rule out a loose screw causing any kind of jump. After that first disappointing range session, I came back and I talked to my buddy Joe about it. Yes, that Joe. And he brought out a very valid point with what might be the issue, and that was the muzzle brake that was affixed to the end of the barrel. He asked me, did you try it without the brake? I told him, I said, no, I didn't even think to. So earlier I mentioned that dynamically matched barrel weight that Ruger includes that you replace the muzzle brake with, which is supposed to prevent there to be any kind of change of impact with the given load when you shoot at the target. Essentially, if you're getting a group that big in this location with the brake, switching to the weight should net the same size group in the same location with the same round. That's kind of the theory behind that. There's also just the thread protector that comes with it. I didn't try either of those with it the first time out. I will be the first person to tell you that I was getting frustrated with the results from that initial range session, and I had pretty much decided that I needed to put the rifle away at that point. So aside from the disappointing results from the initial range session, the other thing that really bothers me with this rifle is the way that the metal tends to tarnish. Now, it's rusting. It's not rusting like what a piece of carbon steel would rust, but it's still getting severe staining and oxidation on it anytime it's exposed to the elements. I have been keeping the rifle. The reason you haven't been seeing it on the wall here is I've actually been keeping it inside my climate-controlled safe where my queens are at, and I took it out for today's video and out in broad daylight. I'll throw up some pictures here where I had the rifle sitting on top of my trash can outside, which is really where I think it belongs. And you'll see here that while it's not real clear in the picture, you can see that there's some tarnish that is coming up on the surface. So I said a lot about that. I kind of rambled and ranted about the lack of quality with the weather resistance of the metal that is claimed to be an impervious weather resistant rifle. You know, these are made, they're advertised for being a gun that somebody would take to Alaska on professional hunts with. And then when you read in the manual that it says, hey, this might happen and you might need to wax it or oil it frequently to prevent it from rusting up, that's a little bit of a downer, especially when, like with the Ruger American that we tested just the other day, or really with any of these other rifles that you see up here, the finishes on them are more than adequate to protect them in this kind of environment, and yet the finish on this Ruger Hawkeye seems to want to fall short. If the initial range results with the rifle would have been better than what they are, I would be less concerned about the finish of the metal and the oxidation that is occurring with it. But I just really wasn't at all impressed with what I got out of this rifle on that initial range review. Since then, I have done a little more research online with what other people are saying about it, and it seems to be kind of par for the course. Now, while the MSRP on this particular rifle is nearly $1,700, I didn't pay that for it, but I still paid more than twice as much for this rifle as I did that second generation Ruger American. To put it in perspective, I could have bought the Ruger American, the Vortex Viper scope, and the Stevens Model 334, all for about the price that I paid for this rifle. So with that in mind, what are we going to do with it? What's next? Well, as I mentioned to my buddy Joe a couple of months ago, I am going to take it back out to the range. I'm going to do it without the muzzle brake. I'm actually going to take the brake, and I'm going to shoot a couple of groups side by side, either with the brake and without it. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and remove the barreled action from the stock. I'm going to go ahead and torque to spec the action screws. I'm going to double check everything and make sure that I'm not finding something weird on the package before I take it back out there to do that. But I've been doing this for a long time, and typically if I'm having some kind of issue like this, I can figure it out pretty easily. And with this one, it's not doing anything consistently bad, you know, like moving in a straight line or side to side in a manner that would indicate that there's a loose screw. It just really kind of seems to be all over the place. And considering the frustration that it's caused me in the past, I'm really going to have to be objective about it when I take it back out there. I'm actually going to take a second shooter with me and have somebody else do some group work with it, so that my negative feelings towards it can be removed from that equation. And we will be revisiting it in the very near future to see if we can figure out if it was a fluke and has something to do with the brake, or if it's just generally not a real accurate package. I'd like to know what you think about it. Have you messed around with one of these? Do you have any experience with a Ruger M77 Hawkeye Guide Gun? This one is a 2024 production. It actually said so in the box. It had the 75th year sticker with it and everything. I know they've been out for a few years. I know there have been a few minor changes along the way. I'd like to know your thoughts. I'd like to know what you know about these. Let's keep the conversation rolling on this one. Sorry if it sounded like I was complaining a little bit on this. It is just a little disappointing to have a rifle that cost this much that performed as poorly as this one did the first time we had it out. I'll get off of the soapbox for now. Let me know down below what you think. If you want to see a second part of this, stay tuned. It's going to be coming out in the very near future. Until next time, take care and God bless.